Domnule președinte Emil Constantinescu, domnule președinte al Senatului României, domnilor președinți, doamnelor și domnilor ambasadori, miniștri, distinși invitați, este realmente o mare plăcere și o mare onoare să pot participa la acest important forum și cred că este o datorie de onoare să exprim public întreaga mea apreciere pentru ceea ce organizatorii și ca inițiativă a Academiei pentru Diplomația Culturală din Berlin au realizat în cadrul acestei conferințe. Și, bineînțeles, un cuvânt special de apreciere pentru rolul domnului președinte Emil Constantinescu în realizarea acestui important proiect, nu doar de diplomație culturală, dar un proiect cu o semnificație politică extrem de importantă. În ceea ce privește contribuția de fond, având în vedere și participarea externă, îmi veți permite să continui în limba engleză. It is an honor and a privilege, as I mentioned, for me to be invited to this opening session of a forum with such a challenging topic. As a diplomat, I'm equally happy and proud that diplomacy, and especially the cultural diplomacy, will be under the scrutiny of such a highly intellectual gathering, and I'm convinced that the outcome of your debates and our debates will be a worthy documentary source of our future work. Even if the geographical and cultural term of Levant was being put into circulation only at the beginning of the modern era, the assertion that the Levant is the cradle of the European culture remains essentially true and may indeed be exploited by identifying this area with the source of what is known today as the third pillar of the international relations, namely the cultural exchanges. Or, if you prefer so, the cultural diplomacy. Thus, the ancient core of the Levant, the ancient Greek, Ionia, and the Eastern Mediterranean area contributed to the birth of the European spirit, generating major religions and a substantial part of the classical philosophy. Feeling that they belonged to and shared the Levantine spirit, especially after taking over the Byzantine heritage, brilliantly summed up by the great historian Nicolae Iorga as Byzantium after Byzantium, the intellectuals of the Levant and the Balkans initiated as early as the 17th century the genuine modernization of the countries belonging to this cultural and geographical area. Scholars like Dosoftei, Nicolae Milescu Spătaru, Dimitrie Cantemir, Antim Ivireanu, Constantin Brâcoveanu, in their capacities as clerics or statesmen, could be quoted as forerunners of cultural diplomats in an area covering East and West alike. The diversity of the civilization and cultures in the Mediterranean area and the Levant paved the way for turning this specific region into a meeting and a melting point. An economic hub for millenniums, this space has also established channels of cultural communications. It was the diversity that gave the impetus to the Levantine populations to lead the way for another great innovation, the mutual understanding and acceptance of different cultures. So, while the term cultural diplomacy may be a recent addition to the diplomatic lingo, its roots run deeper indeed and can be found in the cultural fusion that took place in the Levant. The Levant has maintained its diversity throughout its long history, up to the present day. We can, nowadays, see a region where some states are fully fledged EU members and others are on their way to EU membership. Some countries are our valued partners inside NATO. We see consolidated democracies like our strategic partner Turkey, which prove by example to the whole region that there is more in the politics than the false choice presented by some analysts between repression and extremism. Other countries still strive to maintain and progress on the difficult path towards democracy. Others are now starting their transition from an authoritarian system to one that gives each citizen an equal voice and ensures that all can enjoy safely and in dignity the rights and liberties to which they are entitled as human beings. The Arab Spring represents a cornerstone in the history of the countries in the region. It is an immense opportunity for these nations, triggering a process of reforms and modernization. Of course, there is also a huge challenging process. Being highly aware of global significance of the recent developments in the Middle East, Romania encouraged in its dialogue and contacts with key players and partners in the region or international community, a rapid stabilization of the situation, and constantly promoted the need for these transformation processes to bring benefits in terms of democracy, human rights, peaceful social coexistence and prosperity, but also to contribute to the consolidation of regional stability. And at this point, I have to say that the accomplishment of these aspirations would also influence in a very substantial manner the capacity of the countries and societies in the area to develop their cultural heritage, assets, and better promote externally their values in this field. Obviously, cultural diplomacy could only benefit from such evolution. Romania has long enjoyed a special relation with the countries that have belonged to the old Levant from a cultural and geographical point of view. Having gone through the long and arduous journey that took us from a dictatorship to democracy and EU and NATO membership, we stand ready to share our experience with our friends and partners in the region. Romania shall continue to stay engaged with the region as it undergoes this great democratic transformation, and to work with our partners in a relation based on a mutual respect and common interests. Romania's commercial exchanges, for instance, with the countries of the Levantine area totaled last year more than $7 billion. While this is positive news, we aim to expand and consolidate our economic ties to the countries of the region. Just to give you an example, next week my colleague, the Minister of Economy, will visit Lebanon to meet with his counterpart and hold talks aimed at enhancing our relations in this field. During his visit, he will also preside the Romanian-Lebanon Business Forum, which represents an opportunity for our economic community to strengthen its ties and involvement with its Lebanese counterparts and the region as a whole. Our economic interest in the ancient area of the Levant is doubled by a strong desire to enhance our political ties. During my mandate as Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have already had the opportunity to meet my Jordanian, Israeli, Palestinian, and Turkish colleagues, and I am determined to continue and extend the direct, open dialogue with my counterparts in this area. Bearing in mind Romania's EU membership, I feel obliged to mention the important political contribution brought to the region by the Union for the Mediterranean. This political instrument, which reunites over 40 countries around the objective of cooperation in the Mediterranean region, which is deeply associated through its eastern part to the notion of Levant, has been particularly helpful in establishing a sustainable cooperation framework in the entire area. The projects implemented under the auspices of the Union for Mediterranean are meant to contribute to the advancement of the European neighbourhood policy, and they cover multiple dimensions, from infrastructure development to environmental protection and education. In this context, it is important to underline the importance of projects aimed at increasing people-to-people contacts, developing common understanding, consolidating civil societies, all of them with an important role in the transformation and democratization process occurring in this region. On the other hand, we cannot ignore that while the Levant has most often made the proof of its people's resilience and ability to find common understanding and foster cooperation, the instances when this fails can have terrible consequences for the countries involved and for the region as a whole. One case when diplomacy has, so far, failed to bring about a solution is the current conflict in Syria, a state situated in more than just the geographical sense, at the very heart of the Levant. We are deeply troubled by the terrible tragedy that the Syrian people is facing and by its humanitarian and regional ramifications. Romania stands ready to help in this process, drawing on its own experience regarding the transition to democracy, its respect to the rights and values of the various minorities that dwell in our country, and its long friendship with the Syrian people. To sum up, what is the lesson the long and brilliant history of the Levant might teach present-day cultural diplomacy? First of all, we may think of its role as a mediator between Europe and the Orient, which nowadays is probably more relevant than ever. Secondly, at a time when cultural diplomacy has become a pillar of EU foreign policy for countries outside EU, it is important to remember the role played by the Levant and its populations in developing internationally the concept of cultural diversity, meaning essentially the capacity of a society to accept and take benefits from the coexistence or cohabitation of various cultures at the same time. Similarly, we find in the history of the old Levant a major concept of present-day cultural diplomacy, namely the fact that a cultural and diplomatic activity carried out by several partners promoting a set of common values has a wider and longer lasting impact than individual and separate initiatives. Taking into consideration Romania's positive engagement through the time in the Levant and in the Balkans, I can assure you that my country will be, alongside with your own countries, a strong voice in the international chorus, supporting the need for devising a unitary cultural strategy at international level to include this area whose central importance for the world's culture and civilization is unanimously acknowledged. Vreau să vă mulțumesc pentru atenție.